A courtroom explodes in celebration, corrupt officers smirking, patting each other on the back, victory in their hands. But as the judge prepares to close the case, a single voice cuts through the noise, unraveling everything they thought they had won. What happens when the truth comes out? Let us know in the comments section below. The cuffs were too tight. Catherine Hudson sat stiffly in the back seat of the police car, her wrists burning against the cold steel, her fingers tingling from lack of circulation. The air inside was thick with the scent of cheap coffee and sweat, and she could hear the two officers in the front laughing, celebrating like they had just won the lottery. "I told you," Officer Chad Rollins said, grinning as he glanced at his partner. "She walked right into it, didn't even see it coming." Sergeant Ethan Walker chuckled, his fingers tapping against the steering wheel. "Text the guys. Let 'em know we got another one. Another big catch for the department." Catherine didn't say a word. Her heart pounded, but her face remained blank, unreadable. This wasn't the first time she had been in handcuffs, but this was different. She wasn't playing a role. She wasn't under deep cover. This time, it was real. Or at least, it looked real. Her hands curled into fists. These men thought they had her, thought they had caught just another black woman who didn't belong, who could be thrown away without a second thought. She had seen this play out too many times before. They didn't know who she was. Yet, the flashing lights reflected off the windows of the police station as the car pulled up to the curb. Officer Rollins yanked open the door and grabbed her by the arm. "All right, let's go, superstar." Catherine didn't flinch. She let him pull her out, keeping her head high, shoulders squared, moving with the grace of someone who had been here before. The moment she stepped inside, the noise hit her. Phones ringing, voices shouting, the clatter of keyboards. The station smelled of old coffee, burnt plastic, and something deeper, something stale, like the ghosts of 1,000 injustices that had passed through its walls. A few officers turned to look as she was led past the desks, some raising an eyebrow, others smirking. One of them, a younger officer with nervous eyes, leaned toward Rollins as they walked by. "This hurt?" "Oh yeah," Rollins said. "Busted her right in the middle of the university. Bag full of powder. A real shame." The younger officer hesitated, shifting on his feet. He opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowing whatever doubt had tried to crawl its way out. Catherine caught the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Good. They might not know who she was yet, but something about this wasn't sitting right with at least one of them. Rollins shoved her forward, leading her toward processing. "Come on, let's get this over with. Got drinks waiting for us after this." The officer at the desk, a tired-looking woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, barely glanced up as she reached for the paperwork. "Name?" Rollins smirked. "Catherine Hudson. Drug possession, intent to distribute, the usual." Catherine tilted her head slightly, watching him. He was enjoying this. He wanted to make sure everyone heard it, that the story was already being written before she had a chance to speak. The woman behind the desk sighed, adjusting her glasses. "All right. Prince." Catherine stepped forward, placing her cuffed hands where they were told. The scanner beeped, capturing the ridges and whorls of her fingerprints, locking her into the system. Another officer walked by and scoffed, shaking his head. "Damn shame. She looks like she had a future." Rollins laughed. "Yeah, well, not anymore." Catherine stayed quiet. "Not yet." They ran through the usual process, mugshot, more paperwork, a pat-down that was just a little too rough, a cell that smelled like sweat and despair. The door clanged shut behind her, the metal cold against her fingertips as she leaned back against the wall. She exhaled slowly. Now the game began. She knew exactly what would happen next. They would sit her here for hours, let the walls close in, let the weight of the system press down until she broke, until she begged, until she confessed to something she didn't do. Then they would parade her in front of the judge, shove a plea deal in her face, take it, or face years behind bars. It was a script she had seen play out too many times, and they had no idea that she was about to rewrite it. Hours passed. Footsteps echoed down the hall, growing closer. Then, a key in the lock. Rollins stepped in, holding a file in one hand, his smirk still firmly in place. "All right, here's the deal," he said, leaning against the bars. "Your little stunt tonight? Not gonna fly. We got everything on you. Fingerprints on the bag, surveillance footage, witness statements. It's open and shut." Catherine tilted her head slightly. "Is it?" Rollins narrowed his eyes. "You got two choices," he continued. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. The easy way? You take the deal. 5 years. Could be out in 3 with good behavior. Not bad, huh?" Catherine didn't move. Rollins' smile faltered slightly. "The hard way?" he went on, shifting his stance. "We take this to trial, and trust me, you don't want that. A jury in this town? They'll eat you alive." Catherine exhaled through her nose, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I appreciate the offer," she said, her voice smooth, measured, "but I think I'll pass." Rollins blinked. "Excuse me." "I said no." Silence. For the first time since this started, Rollins' confidence cracked. Just a little. Catherine leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping just enough to make him lean in. "You think you've got me," she said. "You think you know exactly how this is going to go. But here's the thing." She smiled. "You don't." Rollins' jaw clenched. "Suit yourself," he snapped, shoving the file under his arm. "Enjoy rotting in here." He turned and stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Catherine leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes for just a moment. One down. The real fight hadn't even started yet. Catherine sat in the dimly lit holding cell, her fingers tapping against the metal bench beneath her. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, the sound barely audible against the steady hum of the station outside. It was a habit, something she did when she was thinking, when she was planning. They thought she was just another statistic, another name to be buried under a system designed to crush people like her. They thought they had her backed into a corner, and maybe, if she were anyone else, they would have. But Catherine Hudson had spent her entire career studying men like them, watching how they operated, learning their moves before they made them. The game wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. The sound of footsteps approaching made her pause, her fingers stilling mid-tap. The lock clicked, and the heavy door creaked open. Lisa Barrett stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She was young, fresh out of law school, and carried herself like she still believed the system could be saved, that it could be fair if people just fought hard enough. Catherine almost pitied her. Lisa stepped inside, setting a thin folder on the bench between them. "I'm your public defender," she said. "Lisa Barrett." Catherine gave a slow nod. "Pleasure." Lisa's lips pressed together, her eyes flickering over Catherine's face. "Look, I won't waste your time. The prosecution's offering a deal, 5 years. Plead guilty, and you could be out in 3. Catherine leaned back against the wall, her gaze steady. "That's cute." Lisa blinked. "I'm sorry? That you think I'd take it?" Lisa exhaled sharply, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Listen, I don't know what you're holding on to, but this is the best deal you're going to get. They have evidence, fingerprints, surveillance footage. They have a witness." Catherine tilted her head slightly. "Do they?" Lisa sighed. "Yes. And if we take this to trial, they'll make sure a jury sees you as nothing more than a criminal. The best-case scenario is a conviction that lands you 10, maybe 15 years. Catherine studied her, watching the way her hands clenched slightly at her sides, the way her voice wavered just enough to betray the uncertainty beneath it. Lisa believed what she was saying. That was the problem. Catherine leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough to force Lisa to listen carefully. "You know what I think? I think you know something about this case isn't right. I think you feel it deep down, but you're too scared to say it out loud." Lisa's jaw tensed. Catherine's voice softened. "What do you think happens if I take the deal?" Lisa frowned. "You do your time and—" "No," Catherine cut in. "Not to me. To them." Lisa hesitated. Catherine smiled faintly. "They celebrate, they go out drinking tonight, maybe. They make a few jokes, maybe. They don't even remember my name in a week, but they know it worked. They know they can do it again. And again." Lisa swallowed. "I don't." "You do," Catherine said. "You just don't want to admit it." For a long moment, Lisa didn't move. She looked at Catherine like she was trying to figure something out, like she was searching for a crack in the confidence that Catherine refused to let slip. Then she exhaled and shook her head. "I can't make promises, but if you really want to fight this—" "I do." Lisa nodded, grabbing the folder and tucking it under her arm. "Then I'll start looking into the evidence, but I need you to be ready. This won't be easy." Catherine smirked. "I never expected it to be." Lisa left without another word, and Catherine let the silence settle around her once more. She had planted the first seed. Now she just had to wait for it to grow. Hours passed. Maybe more. She closed her eyes, listening. The murmur of officers moving in and out of the station, the ringing of phones, the distant laughter from a break room, the kind of laughter that only belonged to men who believed they had already won. Then footsteps. Not rushed, not casual, purposeful. The doors swung open again, and this time it wasn't Lisa. Officer Chad Rollins stepped inside, arms crossed, a smirk still playing on his lips. "You know," he drawled, "I gotta give it to you. Most people in your position are already begging for a deal by now." Catherine didn't move. Rollins stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "I don't think you understand how this works." Catherine looked up at him, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh, I think I do." His jaw tightened slightly. "You think this is some kind of game?" Catherine tilted her head. "Isn't it?" Rollins scoffed, shaking his head. "You really want to take this all the way to trial? You think a jury's going to believe you over us?" Catherine smiled, slow and deliberate. "I think you're scared." Rollins' smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. Catherine leaned forward, just enough to make him uneasy. "I think you know exactly what you did. And I think deep down you know you left a loose end somewhere. Because men like you—" She let the silence stretch between them. "You always do." His hand curled into a fist at his side. He was good at hiding his temper, but she could see it. The way his shoulders tensed, the way his fingers twitched like he wanted to grab something, her, the chair, the file in his hand, anything to ground himself. "I don't know what you think you're playing at," he muttered, voice low, "but it won't work." Catherine smiled. "We'll see." Rollins took a step back, exhaling sharply. "You're done here. Enjoy your last night of peace before we make sure you don't see the outside world again." He turned and stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Catherine leaned back against the wall, her heart steady. The game had officially begun. Now it was only a matter of time. The courthouse buzzed with energy, reporters whispering in the hallways, cameras flashing as soon as the elevator doors opened. Catherine Hudson stepped out in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles, flanked by two officers who looked a little too smug for their own good. The hallway smelled like cheap floor polish and coffee left out too long, and every step she took echoed in the marble-clad corridors. She held her head high, her expression unreadable, eyes scanning the crowd as if she were observing the world from the outside. Lisa Barrett walked beside her, gripping her briefcase so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. She had spent the past 3 nights drowning in law books, old case files, and security footage she wasn't supposed to have. Her doubt was still there, but something had shifted. The more she looked, the less things made sense. Catherine wasn't some street dealer. She didn't fit the mold, didn't have the history, and none of the so-called evidence against her had any real weight. And yet, here they were, about to argue against an entire system that had already decided her fate before she ever stepped into this building. "Stay calm," Lisa muttered as they neared the courtroom doors. Catherine smirked. "I am calm." Lisa shot her a look, but Catherine wasn't lying. She had never been more in control. The moment they entered, all eyes turned toward her. The jury was already seated, a collection of faces she didn't recognize, but had studied from a distance. Mostly white, mostly older. The kind of people who would already have an opinion about a black woman accused of drug possession before a single word was spoken. On the prosecution's side, District Attorney Richard Calloway sat stiffly, his suit crisp, his glasses perched perfectly on his nose. He didn't even look at Catherine as she was led to her seat, his focus instead on the documents in front of him. He had already won in his mind. Judge Rebecca Thornton entered, her robe billowing behind her as she took her seat. She was older, seasoned, with deep lines set into her face from years of watching cases like this unfold. She adjusted her glasses, took a slow sip of water, then cleared her throat. "Let's proceed." The bailiff called for opening statement. Calloway stood first, buttoning his suit jacket as he walked toward the jury. He didn't need notes. He had done this 100 times before. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here today is a simple case. The defendant, Catherine Hudson, was caught in possession of illicit substances with the intent to distribute. The evidence is clear. Her fingerprints were found on the bag. She was seen on security cameras, and we even have a witness prepared to testify against her." He turned slightly, pacing in front of them. "This isn't about race, about background, or about privilege. This is about facts, and the facts tell us that Catherine Hudson broke the law." He let the words settle, then walked back to his seat, looking satisfied. Lisa took a breath, then stood. She was nervous. Catherine could see it in the way she adjusted her blazer, in the way she exhaled sharply before taking her first step forward. But she spoke with conviction. "The prosecution would like you to believe this is simple," Lisa said, looking directly at the jury. "That the evidence is airtight. But what if I told you that things are not what they seem?" She paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough. "The defendant is a woman with no criminal history, no prior arrests, no connection to the drug trade, and yet in the middle of a university campus during a public lecture, she was somehow involved in a crime she has no record of committing before?" She turned slightly, facing the jury fully now. "I ask you, does that sound simple to you?" Murmurs ran through the courtroom. Lisa knew she had their attention. Judge Thornton nodded. "Proceed with the first witness." Calloway stood. "The prosecution calls Officer Chad Rowlands to the stand." Catherine's hands tightened in her lap. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Rollins walked up, adjusting his uniform, his expression carefully neutral. He took the oath, then settled into his seat, back straight, eyes forward. Calloway approached. "Officer Rollins, can you tell the court what happened on the night of the arrest?" Rollins nodded. "We received an anonymous tip about a drug deal happening on campus. My partner and I arrived at the scene and witnessed the defendant acting suspiciously near a backpack that contained a large quantity of cocaine. When we approached, she attempted to walk away quickly, so we stopped her. Upon searching the bag, we found her fingerprints all over it. Calloway nodded approvingly. And were there any other individuals present? No, just her. Calloway smiled slightly. No further questions. Lisa stood. She approached Rollins slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Officer Rollins," she began, her voice steady, "you mentioned an anonymous tip. Do you know the identity of the caller?" Rollins hesitated. No. Lisa nodded. "So you can't confirm whether or not this tip was legitimate?" "The call was traced to a public phone booth," Rollins said quickly. "We followed protocol." Lisa tilted her head. "Speaking of protocol, you stated that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the bag. Are you aware of how many sets of fingerprints were present?" Rollins shifted slightly in his seat. The report only focused on hers. Lisa smiled faintly. "So, there were others?" Silence. Lisa turned toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just heard that the evidence presented against my client was selectively examined. Why? What is it that the prosecution doesn't want us to see?" The tension in the room thickened. Calloway frowned, his fingers curling against the desk. Lisa turned back to Rollins. "One last question, officer. In your years on the force, have you ever witnessed an innocent person falsely accused?" Rollins stiffened. Calloway shot up. "Objection." "Sustained?" Judge Thornton said, though her gaze lingered on Rollins a moment longer than necessary. Lisa nodded, stepping back. "No further questions." The courtroom buzzed as Rollins left the stand, his face tight, his jaw clenched. He didn't look at Catherine as he walked by. He was starting to crack. The next witness was called, a forensic analyst. Lisa questioned the inconsistencies in the fingerprint evidence, the lack of other suspects, the rushed nature of the investigation. By the time the court recessed for the day, Calloway no longer looked as confident as he had in the morning. Catherine was led back to her cell, her chains clinking with every step. Lisa walked beside her, whispering under her breath. "They're starting to doubt." Catherine smiled. "Good." Lisa hesitated. "There's something else." Catherine looked at her. Lisa glanced around, lowering her voice. "I found something in the evidence reports, a file that was supposed to be sealed. It lists you as a—" She stopped herself. "It doesn't matter, not yet. But if they find out—" Catherine's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure we get to the truth first." Lisa nodded slowly. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. The courtroom was packed. The energy inside buzzed with tension, thick and suffocating, as if everyone in the room was holding their breath at once. The prosecution had played their hand, done everything in their power to paint Catherine Hudson as a criminal, a trafficker, a liar. And yet, cracks had already begun to form. The jury had seen them. They had heard Lisa Barrett rip through the inconsistencies in the investigation, had watched Officer Chad Rollins stumble over his own words, had felt the weight of something much bigger lurking beneath the surface. Catherine sat at the defendant's table, calm, unreadable. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, but her mind was sharp, calculating. She had spent her entire career studying deception, watching men like Rollins and Calloway bend the system in their favor, believing that their power made them untouchable. Today, that illusion would shatter. The bailiff's voice rang out. "The defense calls Catherine Hudson to the stand." A murmur ran through the courtroom. This wasn't part of the plan. Defendants rarely testified in their own trials, especially not when the prosecution thought they had already won. Catherine rose, her orange jumpsuit stark against the dull wood of the courtroom. The chains around her wrists rattled softly as she walked to the stand, but her steps were steady, deliberate. She took her seat, lifted her chin as the bailiff swore her in. Lisa stood, walking slowly toward the witness stand, meeting Catherine's gaze. There was a flicker of something there, something unspoken between them. Lisa turned to the jury. You've heard the prosecution's version of events. You've heard about the so-called evidence against my client. Now, let's hear her side of the story. She turned back to Catherine. Ms. Hudson, were you in possession of the drugs the night of your arrest? No. Did you know about the bag before Officer Rawlins and Sergeant Walker approached you? No. Lisa nodded, pacing slightly in front of the jury. Then why do you think you were arrested? Catherine let a small smile play at the corner of her lips. Because it was never about the drugs. A hush fell over the courtroom. Lisa's voice was steady. Then what was it about? Catherine exhaled slowly, then turned her gaze to the jury. It was about power, control. Officers Rawlins and Walker have done this before. Planted evidence, falsified reports, manipulated the system to lock away people they believe won't fight back. Calloway shot up. Objection. Judge Thornton lifted a hand. Overruled. Continue. Lisa leaned forward slightly. How do you know this? Catherine held her stare. Because I've been investigating them for 2 years. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, a frenzy of movement from the prosecution's table. Calloway's face drained of color. Rawlins stiffened in his seat, his hands curling into fists. Lisa didn't move. She let the moment settle, let the weight of Catherine's words sink into the jury's skin. Then she spoke again. Would you like to clarify what you mean by that? Catherine nodded. I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My real title is Director Catherine Hudson. The courtroom descended into chaos. Reporters scrambled, typing furiously into their phones, murmurs turning into full-blown shouts. Judge Thornton pounded her gavel. Order! Order! It took nearly a full minute for the noise to die down. Catherine remained perfectly still, her gaze unwavering. Lisa turned back to her. You were undercover? Yes. For what purpose? Catherine exhaled. We received numerous reports of corruption within the Birmingham Police Department, specifically tied to officers manufacturing drug cases to boost arrest numbers. I was planted as a civilian target to confirm the pattern. Lisa let that sit. And did you? Yes. Did officers Rawlins and Walker tamper with evidence in your case? Catherine turned her head, locking eyes with Rawlins across the room. Yes. Rawlins jumped up. That's a damn lie. Judge Thornton slammed her gavel again. Officer Rawlins, sit down or I will have you removed. Calloway shot up. This is outrageous. If she was undercover, why wasn't this disclosed before trial? Catherine let a slow smirk cross her lips. Because I wanted to see how far you were willing to go to bury an innocent woman. Silence. Lisa stepped forward, placing a thick file onto the stand. Your Honor, the defense submits into evidence a federal investigation file that details Officer Rawlins and Sergeant Walker's involvement in falsified drug charges spanning 5 years. Judge Thornton's lips pressed into a thin line. Proceed. Lisa flipped open the folder. Contained in this file are sworn affidavits from multiple victims, forensic evidence showing tampered fingerprints, and internal police reports that contradict Officer Rawlins' testimony. She turned to the jury. This isn't just about my client. This is about how many people were locked away under false pretenses, how many families were destroyed by men who believed they were untouchable. Catherine met the jury's gaze. I was one of the lucky ones. I had a way out. But how many others didn't? The room was deathly silent. Lisa exhaled. No further questions. Judge Thornton turned to Calloway. Prosecution? Calloway stood, face pale, hands shaking slightly. No questions. Lisa turned back to the judge. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, the defense moves to dismiss all charges against my client and requests immediate release. Judge Thornton's expression was unreadable. The entire room was waiting, breath caught in their chests. waiting for the hammer to drop. She looked at Catherine, then at the jury. Then she nodded. Motion granted. All charges against Catherine Hudson are dismissed. Another explosion of noise, cheers from one side of the room, furious whispers from the other. Catherine closed her eyes for just a moment, allowing herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. Then she opened them, looking directly at Rollins and Walker. They were already being approached by federal agents. Handcuffs snapped shut around their wrists. Catherine stood as the bailiff approached, unlocking her shackles. The cold steel slipped away, and for the first time in days, she rolled her shoulders, feeling free. Elisa turned to her, smiling. "We did it." Catherine smirked. "No." She glanced toward Rollins, watching as he was dragged away, his face twisted with rage. They did it to themselves. As she stepped out of the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter, brighter. Justice, for once, had done its job.